I'm Maya, 28, female, and I gave him my heart. He gave me scars. Now I'm the storm he never saw coming. This isn't just a dramatic turn of phrase. It's the cold, hard truth of how I emerged from the wreckage of a 5-year relationship with Ethan. He was a charismatic tech entrepreneur, and I, a graphic designer, believed in his vision with every fiber of my being. I poured my time, my emotional energy, and even some of my meager savings into supporting his dreams, convinced that our shared future was just around the corner. But while I built him up, he was busy tearing me down, leaving behind a trail of emotional scars that would one day be the catalyst for his undoing. Looking back, the signs of his emotional manipulation were there, subtle at first, then glaring. Ethan had an uncanny ability to turn my successes into a reflection of his own greatness. When I landed my first big freelance design contract, he didn't celebrate my achievement. Instead, he said, "Of course you did, Maya. I gave you the confidence to do it. You're learning so much from me." His words, meant to sound like praise, were a subtle way of taking credit for my hard work, a pattern of gaslighting that slowly chipped away at my self-worth. Another telling moment came with my dream of launching my own design studio. I had spent months working on a business plan, filled with excitement. When I finally showed it to Ethan, expecting support, he laughed. "Maya, be realistic," he said, his smile patronizing. "You're so good at working for me. Why would you risk it all on your own? The market is too competitive. You need my protection." He made my ambition feel foolish, my dreams, a child's fantasy. He convinced me that I was safer, better off, working as his unpaid, on-call designer, a belief that kept me tethered to him and his manipulative grasp. The cruelest irony was how he used my own creative talents against me. He knew I dreamed of working on projects that had a tangible, positive impact on the world. He'd often say, "Once my startup, Innovate, becomes a unicorn, we'll fund all your passion projects. Imagine the good we could do together." He painted vivid pictures of a future he had no intention of sharing, using my deepest desires as a carrot on a stick, binding me to his ambition. My own self, worth, and dreams were not to be pursued, but to be a silent, supportive force behind his success. This insidious emotional manipulation, these small but constant betrayals, were the scars he left behind, and in their painful healing, I was about to become the storm he never saw coming. As Ethan's startup, Innovate, approached a major funding round, his manipulation and neglect escalated. Our relationship, once a partnership, devolved into me being his emotional and financial crutch. He'd come home from stressful meetings, demanding all my attention, leaving no space for my own feelings or my work. When I tried to talk to him about my day, he'd dismissively say, "Honey, my problems are bigger. My decisions affect a company, your little designs can wait." He made my profession feel insignificant, my existence a supporting role in his life's grand drama. I poured my emotional and unknowingly my financial resources into his vision. He had a habit of borrowing money from me for business expenses, always with a grand promise of a huge return once we hit it big. I never questioned it, believing we were in this together. He asked me to design his company's new branding, a sleek, modern logo and website, promising me a significant co-founder's stake and a huge payout from an impending acquisition deal. The promise of being a partner, of finally having my own worth recognized, kept me going, blinding me to the reality of his abuse. He was also subtly sabotaging my freelance work. He'd accidentally delete important client emails from my inbox or forget to pass along crucial messages. When a client complained, he'd turn it around on me, telling me I was too emotionally fragile to handle the pressures of running my own business. His words were a poison, slowly eroding my confidence and my will to pursue my own dreams. He was isolating me, making me entirely dependent on him and his empty promises. The final devastating blow came during a celebratory dinner. Ethan's startup had just secured a major investment, a life-changing sum that would propel him into a new league of success. I was ecstatic, believing this was the moment our shared future would begin. I had dressed in my favorite dress, ready to celebrate us, but when he arrived, he was different. His usual charming smile was replaced by a cold, condescending smirk. He ordered a bottle of expensive champagne, a grand gesture that felt hollow. As we raised our glasses, I toasted to our future. He just laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that chilled me to the bone. "Maya," he began, his voice devoid of all warmth, "this isn't our future. This is my future, and you're not in it." My heart stopped. What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm saying," he continued, a callous indifference in his eyes, that this new phase of my life, my success, it needs a different kind of partner. Someone who can handle the pressure, someone who isn't so emotional. We're done. He then, with a stunning lack of emotion, laid a check on the table, a measly severance that barely covered the money I had lent him, let alone the countless hours of work and emotional labor I had poured into his dream. This should cover you. You'll be fine. He expected me to be fine. He expected me to disappear quietly, to accept his final act of cruelty with a silent grace. He had taken my heart, given me scars, and now he thought he could simply walk away. But he was about to discover that the emotional scars he left behind were not a sign of my fragility, but a source of strength, a powerful and righteous fury that was about to become a storm he never saw coming. The check, a paltry sum left on the dinner table, felt like a final, mocking act of cruelty. Ethan's words, "You're not in it," and his callous dismissal of our 5 years together resonated with a pain so profound it transcended tears. He had taken my heart, he had given me scars, and now he thought he could simply walk away, leaving me emotionally and financially shattered. But his final act of betrayal, the utter lack of remorse, was the very thing that ignited the fire within me, a cold, hard resolve to not just heal, but to seek a reckoning. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I simply took the check, folded it neatly, and placed it in my purse, my face a blank mask. He saw my silence as acceptance, my lack of an outburst as confirmation of my emotional fragility. He was so wrong. My silence was a quiet promise of a storm to come. The days that followed were a blur of raw grief and meticulous planning. I moved out of our shared apartment, a space that now felt tainted by his lies and cruelty. I found a small, sun-drenched studio apartment, a blank canvas where I could begin to rebuild my life. I had lost everything, but in that loss I found a new sense of purpose. The emotional scars he had left behind were not a sign of weakness. They were a badge of my survival, a reminder of the strength I was now beginning to discover. My professional life, once sabotaged by Ethan's manipulations, now became my sanctuary. I poured my heartbreak and my rage into my creative work. I designed a new portfolio, a bold, defiant statement of my talent and my vision. I also began to dig. I started with my financial records, meticulously tracking every penny I had lent him, every hour of unpaid design work I had done for his startup, every promise he had made. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was financial, a cold, calculated theft of my time, my money, and my professional identity. The most damning piece of evidence, however, came from the digital realm. I had designed and built the website for Innovate from scratch. As a security precaution, a habit from my early freelance work, I had built a failsafe, a single backdoor that gave me access to their internal servers and digital archives, a secret key I had never used. He had no idea it existed. He thought he had complete control of his digital kingdom. He was wrong. I used my access to dig into his professional life, unearthing a trove of secrets, manipulated financial statements he had shown to his new investors, explicit communications with a developer he had bribed to get ahead, and most damningly, a series of emails where he explicitly discussed how he had used me, how he had borrowed my money with no intention of paying it back, and how he had convinced me to do all his design work for free with a vague promise of partnership. His own words, cold and calculating, would be his undoing. I found a new friend, Ben, a kind and grounded architect who was working on a project in the same building as my new studio. He saw my pain, my anger, and my quiet resolve. He became my confidante, my rock, a non-judge, mental presence who helped me see my own worth. He was a new kind of support, one built on genuine empathy, not on manipulation. With his unwavering belief in me, the woman Ethan broke was not just healing, she was transforming into a force of nature, a storm he never saw coming. The sting of Ethan's final cruelty had given way to a cold, unwavering purpose. My heartbreak was a raw wound, but it was now overshadowed by a chilling, methodical focus. The silence in my new studio apartment, a small, sun-drenched space I had found for myself, was not lonely. It was a sanctuary of my own making, a blank canvas for my retribution. I didn't tell a soul, not even Ben, about my plan. This was my fight, my pain, and my revenge. I immersed myself in a feverish state of work, channeling my grief and anger into my digital investigation. My old backdoor into the Innovate servers was my most potent weapon. I spent hours sifting through emails, financial documents, and internal communications, meticulously compiling a digital dossier of Ethan's professional and personal deceit. My graphic design skills, once used to build his brand, were now deployed to create a powerful, irrefutable narrative of his betrayal. The story was so much bigger than just me. It was about his fraud, his manipulation of investors, and his disregard for anyone who stood in the way of his ambition. The evidence was damning. Manipulated financial forecasts designed to mislead new investors, a series of off-books payments to a developer to get a project fast, racked, and a cache of emails where Ethan openly discussed his plan to get me to do all of his branding for free. He had even, in one particularly egregious email, discussed how my emotional fragility was a useful tool for him, allowing him to subtly sabotage my own career so I would remain dependent on him. The sheer callousness of his words was breathtaking. My heart, which I thought had nothing left to break, shattered anew. I began to see my life in a new light. Ethan's gaslighting, his subtle sabotage, his constant dismissal of my worth, it was all a deliberate, calculated strategy to keep me small, to ensure I would be nothing more than his shadow. The scars he left behind were not a sign of my weakness, but a testament to his deliberate cruelty. And in that realization, a new strength was born, a resilience that was unbreakable. My new friend, Ben, an architect, became my confidante and a quiet pillar of support. He saw the pain, the exhaustion, and the fierce determination in my eyes, but he never pushed me to talk about it. Instead, he offered me coffee, a silent presence while I worked, and his unwavering belief in my talent. He was a stark contrast to Ethan, a man who saw my creativity as a source of light, not something to be controlled. I knew that a direct, messy confrontation would be ineffective. Ethan would twist the narrative, play the victim, and discredit me. My plan was to hit him where he was most vulnerable, his image, his credibility, his professional reputation. I would use my intimate knowledge of his weaknesses, my skills, and my new-found strength to orchestrate his public and deeply personal downfall. The storm was coming, and Ethan, basking in the sunlight of his false success, had no idea he was about to be caught right in the middle of it. With my digital dossier of Ethan's deception complete, the time for my quiet revenge was upon me. The evidence was irrefutable: screenshots of manipulated financial statements, recordings of his phone calls with a bribed developer, and a damning folder of emails detailing his plan to exploit my emotions and talent for his own gain. It was all there, a meticulously compiled narrative of his fraud. I'd given him my heart, and he had left me with scars, but the healing had given me a new, powerful resolve. I didn't want a messy, public confrontation. I wanted to hit him where he was most vulnerable, his image and his career. I knew his new investors, a group of powerful but notoriously cautious venture capitalists, were his lifeline. I also knew that their trust was built on a foundation of his carefully constructed lies. I decided to send the full, unredacted dossier to the head of the investment firm, a stern, ethical woman I had briefly met at a corporate event and whose reputation for integrity was impeccable. I sent the email from an anonymous account, complete with a subject line that would be impossible to ignore. Regarding Innovate and Julian last name a failsafe you didn't know you needed. I included a link to a secure, untraceable server where I had uploaded all the evidence. My new friend, Ben, the kind architect, became my unsuspecting accomplice. He had asked me for some graphic design work for a new website he was launching, a passion project for sustainable architecture. This was the perfect cover. I poured my talent and my rage into his website, creating a beautiful, elegant design that was the antithesis of Ethan's flashy, but fraudulent, branding. It was a creative refuge, a way to channel my pain into a positive, tangible outcome. Ben was my rock, my sounding board, and he saw my renewed energy as a sign of my healing. He never suspected the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. The fallout from my anonymous email was immediate and explosive. Ethan's investors, upon reviewing the damning evidence, launched an immediate top-secret internal audit. His funding was frozen. His team, bewildered and worried, started reaching out to me, sensing that something was wrong. His confident, arrogant texts to me stopped entirely, replaced by a desperate, frantic silence. He knew the storm was coming, and he knew I was the one who had unleashed it. My first act of public revenge, however, was not about him. It was about me. I launched my own design studio, a bold, defiant move that was a direct repudiation of his gaslighting. I named it Phoenix Designs, a tribute to my own resurrection from the ashes of his betrayal. The branding was clean, powerful, and authentic, a reflection of my new self-worth. The final public blow came at a major industry conference where Ethan was scheduled to be the keynote speaker, a moment of triumph for his career. Instead, I stood up from my quiet seat in the back of the auditorium, a small, unassuming figure, and walked to the microphone. With a calm, unwavering voice, I didn't speak of his betrayal or his manipulation. Instead, I spoke about my own journey, my own passion, my own new studio, and then I simply said, "True innovation is built on integrity, not on lies." As I walked away, the screens behind him, which had been showcasing his company's new branding, suddenly switched to the sleek, elegant logo of my new studio, Phoenix Designs, a silent and powerful message for the entire industry to see. The woman he had broken was no longer silent. She was the storm, and she had just stolen the thunder from his moment of triumph. The chaos that erupted at the industry conference was a symphony of Ben's downfall. The screens, once filled with the flashy branding of his company, now displayed the elegant, defiant logo of my new studio, Phoenix Designs. The audience, initially bewildered by my speech, now buzzed with whispers, connecting the dots. The storm I had warned him of was no longer an abstract threat. It was a visible, undeniable presence, and it had just stolen the spotlight from his moment of triumph. Ben, on stage, stood frozen. His confident, charismatic smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer panic. He knew. He knew I was the one who had unleashed the storm. His carefully constructed professional facade was crumbling in real time, in front of the very people he had spent years trying to impress. His investors, who had already been tipped off by my anonymous email, were seated in the front row. Their faces, once filled with a cautious optimism, were now a picture of cold, ruthless disappointment. A senior partner stood up, her face grim, and silently walked out of the auditorium, a clear and public statement of their lack of confidence. The other investors followed suit, their quiet departure a death knell for Ben's startup. I walked away from the microphone, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Ben finally found me in the back of the room, his face a contorted mask of fury and desperation. He lunged towards me, but a new confidence in my posture, a new resolve in my eyes, stopped him in his tracks. "You did this," he hissed, his voice trembling with impotent rage. "You ruined my life, after everything I did for you." I just looked at him, my expression serene, a quiet triumph in my eyes. "Everything you did for me," I retorted, my voice clear and steady. "You took my money, you took my time, you gaslit me, you sabotaged me, you left me with nothing but scars. I gave you my heart, Ben, and you gave me nothing but pain." His eyes widened, his bravado finally cracking. He had never expected me to fight back. He had never expected me to be so strong. He had never expected the emotional and fragile woman he had gaslit for years to be the very force that would tear his world apart. The room, which had been so quick to applaud his charm, was now a chorus of murmurs of people pointing and whispering, of journalists clamoring for answers. The storm was no longer just an abstract concept. It was a public spectacle, and he was caught right in the middle of it. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that promised his complete and utter ruin. He had left me with nothing, but in his cruelty, he had also given me the strength to build a new life, a new studio, a new, powerful identity. The woman he had broken was no longer silent. She was the storm, and she had just stolen his thunder. The fallout from the conference was immediate and cataclysmic for Ethan. The story of his deception, of the manipulated financial statements, and of his cruel treatment of me went viral. His investors pulled out, his company, Innovate, imploded, and his ambitious career, once so promising, was utterly destroyed. He was left with nothing, a stark and public testament to the consequences of his actions. He became a pariah, his name synonymous with greed, fraud, and emotional abuse. For me, the aftermath was a journey of profound liberation and self-discovery. The cold, righteous anger that had fueled my revenge slowly gave way to a powerful, quiet peace. My new design studio, Phoenix Designs, flourished. The story of my resilience, of the woman who rose from the ashes of betrayal, resonated with clients and with the creative community. My designs, once a hidden talent, were now a testament to my newfound strength and my uncompromising integrity. My friendship with Ben, the kind architect, deepened into a loving, healthy partnership. He saw my passion, my strength, and my scars, and he loved me not in spite of them, but because of them. He was a stark contrast to Ethan, a man who saw my talent as a source of light, not something to be controlled. With his unwavering support, I found a new kind of happiness, one built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. I learned invaluable lessons from the ordeal. I learned that my self-worth was not dependent on anyone's approval. I learned that my passion and my creativity were my greatest strengths, not a weakness to be controlled. And most importantly, I learned that the scars he left behind were not a sign of my fragility, but a powerful, permanent reminder of my resilience. I saw Ethan once, a few years later, at a casual coffee shop. He looked tired and defeated, a shadow of the charismatic man he once was. He saw me, but his gaze was filled with a look of shame and regret. He knew what he had lost. I simply nodded, gave him a polite, detached smile, and walked away, my hand in Ben's. I had given him my heart, he gave me scars, now I was the storm he never saw coming, and I had finally left him in the dust, a permanent, unforgettable monument to the woman whose spirit he thought he could break, and whose triumph he was forced to witness. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.